So I just got done watching episode 3 of season 3 of House of the Dragon, titled Rhaenyra Triumphant. And for many people like myself, this marks the beginning of season 3 in earnest, because the episode certainly felt like it was setting up events for what is hopefully going to be a very eventful season of the show. But before we get into the details, I have to, as customary, give you a spoiler warning because we'll be delving into the events that transpired during the episode. So if you haven't seen the episode and you don't want to know what happens, consider this your spoiler warning. So the episode pretty much starts by throwing us into the thick of it as we get a meeting between the Hightower army led by Ormond Hightower and Daemon and the Dragon Seed Riders. And from the outlook, it actually looked like we're about to get yet another battle, but as it turns out, this was just a meeting to parley with the other side, informing them basically that Rhaenyra had taken over King's Landing and that they'd been ordered to stand down and return back to Old Town. And Ormond reluctantly bends the knee, but before he's allowed to go, he's asked to relinquish his ward, Daeron Targaryen, who, as we should know, was the youngest son of Alicent and King Viserys, and therefore a claimant to the throne. So afterwards, Queen Rhaenyra is informed of the outcome of the meeting, and I just have to say that it actually feels good to be able to call her Queen Rhaenyra, considering all the time that it took for us to get to this point. Basically, she has taken up the title of queen, but she still desires to have a formal coronation in front of all the people in King's Landing. But she quickly discovers from Lord Corlys and the other members of her court that apparently the treasury had been emptied out by Tywin Lannister and they were quickly running out of money. Meanwhile, the rats had pretty much taken over the castle ever since Aegon had gotten all the rat catchers executed last season. And as the episode progresses, she quickly learns about the difficulty and the full scope of being a ruler to the Seven Kingdoms, especially in its present war-torn state, as she has to sit in the throne room and listen to petitioners with all the various common folk coming forward with their own individual problems, and as well all the people of her court, the maids, each one having their own request. And it got to a point that it was clear that she was being inundated with too many requests, and she quickly realizes that she was in over her head. This is why she eventually had to go and seek some counsel from Alicent, particularly about the state of affairs in the Red Keep, wondering if she knew anything about why there was no gold left in the treasury. And Alicent informs her that she had pretty much been left in the dark ever since she was kicked out of the small council. And later on in the episode, she even asked for further advice, because Alicent, as we can remember, was once the acting ruler during the time that King Viserys was very ill and eventually when he succumbed to his illness. So Rhaenyra more or less wanted to know how she was able to cope with that, and Alicent tells her that eventually she's going to have to make a lot of tough decisions, some decisions that will even end up challenging who she thinks she is as a person. And all of this is basically foreshadowing the fact that Rhaenyra might eventually end up a totally different person just because of the pressures of trying to please everyone and realizing that she couldn't and becoming the ruler the realm needs. In the midst of all this, we get a scene with her meeting with the Septum regarding her coronation, and the Septum reminds her that he had only just coronated King Aegon months prior, and now that they were coming up with a story that he had passed away and they didn't have any actual concrete evidence, he was more or less telling her that he couldn't be a part of whatever ploy they were getting into. And Rhaenyra takes this as the Septum drawing a line in the sand, but the Septum had to remind her that she doesn't want to make the Fates an enemy, which in a way is kind of calling back to what happened in Game of Thrones with Cersei and the people of the Fates. We then get a scene with Rhaenyra having dinner with Lord Corlys and his two sons, Adam and Alan. And during the meeting, Corlys informs Rhaenyra that those were actually his two bastard sons and that he has since decided to accept them as his true sons, and he had even named Alan as his heir. And now he needed Rhaenyra to officially recognize them as members of House Velaryon. But later on in the episode, when the 3 Dragon Seed Riders were being knighted by Daemon and Rhaenyra, she opted instead to name Adam as Adam of Hall instead of Adam Velaryon, a fact that Lord Corlys eventually confronts her over, and it was only then that she revealed that she didn't want to draw any further criticism of her claim to the throne by going around and legitimizing bastards. And Lord Corlys was very angry at this because he saw her as being hypocritical, because her own sons, Lucerys and Jaehaerys, had been bastards as well. And meanwhile, she expected everybody to accept them as true-born sons, when she was unwilling to extend the same courtesy to Lord Corlys. And I just have to say that I'm pretty sure that his brother, Lord Vaemond, will be somewhere smiling in the afterlife, because this was pretty much what had gotten him killed in season 1 of House of the Dragon. And now to have Lord Corlys coming out to declare them as bastards in front of everyone, I guess it was just good that Daemon wasn't there, because there's no saying what would have happened regardless of how instrumental Lord Corlys had been to them winning the Battle of the Gullet. In the midst of this, we had a scene with her and Alicent, during which Alicent had requested that the remains of her father, Otto Hightower, should be transported back to Old Town so that he can be buried beside their mother. And there was no doubt that Rhaenyra was feeling quite guilty for having to do what she had done in the last episode, and a part of me suspects this is something that is going to haunt her for the entire duration of her reign. During one of the small council scenes, we have Rhaenyra trying to get advice from her council basically on how to handle everything that was happening, and when she had spoken with Mysaria the White Worm, she informs her to keep in mind the plight of the small folk, that these are the people that she really needs to get on her side in order to legitimize her claim to the throne. And Rhaenyra takes this to heart, because later on in the episode, when she hosts a feast for all the lords, it quickly becomes evident that they were there to be taught a lesson, because when the food was to be served, they discovered that it was all the rats that had been running around the keep, more or less. And while they were there experiencing this, she informs them that their various stores and their hoards of all the goods that they've kept during this wartime period had been raided by the members of the City Watch in order to be redistributed to the people. And later on in the episode, we actually see Rhaenyra with Mysaria meeting with people of King's Landing, assuring them that she was going to rule with strength and in a just manner. And later on, she asked Daemon to help by going to the Vale to collect a tribute from Lady Jane. And it was during these moments that Daemon had to remind her that her greatest asset right now was the fact that she had 6 dragons in total on her side, and that instead of trying to reach for scraps here and there, that they could basically go anywhere, go to the free cities and conquer them and take all their riches. But Rhaenyra refuses the prospects, rejecting the very notion of Targaryens being considered gods amongst men because of their dragons. But Daemon takes the opportunity to remind her that she still had Daemon Targaryen to deal with. And it was at this point that Rhaenyra went to meet with Alicent once again, this time informing her that she didn't plan to actually execute him even though it was her right to, that instead they planned on sending him to the wall because of his involvement in the Dance of Dragons. And Alicent initially doesn't warm up to this news, but eventually she requests that she get to see him one last time before he's shipped off to the north. But during the meeting, it becomes apparent that this wasn't her son Daemon, and the boy, who had been silent for most of the episode, reveals that Aemon had forced him, threatening his mother if he didn't play along and act like Daemon Targaryen, which means that Daemon was pretty much still a claimant to the throne and at large with Aemon Hightower. And the episode ends with them receiving a dragon keeper who had escaped from the town of Tumbleton, and he informs them that Aemon Hightower and Daemon had pretty much taken over the town, which was a town that was loyal to Team Black, as well as one of the dragons, with Rhaenyra vowing retribution as she looks into the flames of the burning Hightower banners. So looking at the episode as a whole, it is clear once again that this was where we were actually supposed to kick off season 3 in the first place, because this does what a season opener typically does by setting up the various factions and plot lines and reminding viewers where everybody stands basically. And as a first episode, I have to say that this was a very strong one, because it really shows us that that position of ruler really comes with a burden, an unspoken burden that we don't really get to see. Because in season 1, when we saw King Viserys, he was more or less a peaceful king and he was more laid back, which was reflective of the time they were living in then. But now that they're in the middle of this civil war, it is clear that it requires a different kind of ruler, and Rhaenyra is quickly finding out that it might be more than she had bargained for. So yeah, I like the direction everything is going. It is showing us that Rhaenyra might not have everything figured out the way she thought, and there are some potential challenges still waiting for her in the road ahead. Anyway, these are just my thoughts about episode 3 of season 3 of House of the Dragon. What did you think about the episode? Did you feel like it felt like an episode 1, or was it a logical follow-up from where we left off last episode? Let me know in the comment section down below. Don't forget to like this video if you enjoyed watching this discussion, and subscribe to the channel with notifications turned on if you'd like to see more discussions like this in the future. And until the next one, this is Michael, signing off.